Most people who walk past this building see a postcard. Guards in red, a famous balcony, tourists with cameras. But here's what they don't see. A man standing barefoot in a corridor, holding a broken piece of glass, trying to find the Queen's bedroom. German bombs tearing through the royal chapel, while the King and Queen sat meters away drinking their morning tea. A king who spent a fortune building the most extravagant palace in England and never slept a single night inside it. This is not the version they teach you. Stay with me.
Before there was a palace here, there was a swamp. In the Middle Ages, this entire area was boggy marshland. The River Tyburn, which now flows in a buried pipe directly beneath the palace, used to wind right through it. Henry VIII seized the land in 1536. It's been royal ever since. But here's where it gets strange. Around 1608, King James I decided to plant hundreds of mulberry trees on the grounds. His grand plan? Feed the trees to silkworms, build a British silk industry, compete with France. The plan collapsed almost immediately. He had planted the wrong species of mulberry tree. The silkworms wouldn't eat them. 400 years later, at least one of those original trees is still standing in the palace gardens, a living monument to one of the most expensive botanical mistakes in British royal history. But the land was about to attract someone with far bigger ambitions than silk.
In 1698, a man named John Sheffield, who would later become the Duke of Buckingham, took one look at the old house on this land, called it unfashionable, and had it torn down. In 1703, he built a new one from scratch. Buckingham House. Wide frontage, manicured gardens, a direct view down the Mall. He loved it so much he referred to it, without irony, as his small house. In 1761, King George III bought it for £21,000, roughly £3 million in today's money, as a private retreat for his wife, Queen Charlotte. Not a palace, a family home. They called it the Queen's House. Then George III's son, George IV, inherited the throne, and inherited his father's sense of restraint. He had none. George IV hired the architect John Nash and told him to make it grand. Nash demolished wings, built new ones, added a massive triumphal arch at the entrance for ceremonial royal processions. You know that arch today. It was eventually moved across the city, its marble arch. George IV spent a fortune. The project ran over budget. Nash was eventually fired. A second architect, Edward Blore, finished the job in 1847. The result? 775 rooms, 760 windows, 1,514 doors. The grandest royal residence in Britain. And not a single king wanted to live in it.
In 1837, an 18-year-old girl became Queen of England. And within weeks of taking the throne, she did something no British monarch before her had done. She moved in to Buckingham Palace. Just like that, a building that had been a rich man's townhouse, then a queen's country retreat, then a half-finished construction project, became the official seat of the British monarchy. Victoria didn't just live here, she turned it into the centre of an empire that, at its peak, controlled roughly a quarter of the Earth's land surface. Heads of state passed through these gates. Treaties were negotiated behind these walls. The balcony, that famous balcony, became the place where Britain showed itself to the world. The palace wasn't just a home, it was a statement. We are here. We are not going anywhere. In 1940, that statement would be put to the most violent test imaginable. Friday, September 13th, 1940. King George VI and his wife, Queen Elizabeth, were inside the palace. They were sitting quietly, drinking tea. The Queen later wrote about it in a letter. She described hearing, and I'm paraphrasing, the unmistakable whir of a German aircraft engine. Then, the sound she knew was coming. 5 high explosive bombs hit Buckingham Palace. The royal chapel was obliterated. The inner courtyard was torn open. The palace gates were blown apart.
4 members of staff were injured. 1 would later die. The King and Queen were meters away. They survived. The Foreign Office told them to leave London. Some advisors suggested Canada. They said no. Instead, they put on their coats and walked into the bombed-out streets of the East End, the part of London getting hit hardest, and sat with families who had lost everything. After the palace was struck, Queen Elizabeth said something that newspapers across Britain printed the next morning. "I am glad we have been bombed. Now we can look the East End in the face." The palace was hit 9 times during the war. Hitler reportedly called Queen Elizabeth, the king's wife, not the young princess, the most dangerous woman in Europe. Not because she fired a weapon, because she wouldn't leave. But the most bizarre threat this palace ever faced didn't come from the sky. It came from inside. 42 years later. July 9th, 1982, 7:15 in the morning. A 31-year-old man named Michael Fagan scaled the palace railings. He found an open window, climbed through it, and then he just walked. Down the corridors of Buckingham Palace, past rooms with nameplates, Charles's room, Diana's room, completely alone. No alarms, no guards, nobody. He stopped at a door, opened it. Queen Elizabeth II was in her bed, awake. Fagan was holding a jagged piece of glass, broken from an ashtray he'd smashed in another room. The Queen picked up the phone and called the palace switchboard, twice, asking for police. Nobody came. A footman eventually appeared, having just finished walking the Queen's dogs, and sat with Fagan until officers finally arrived.
Scotland Yard launched a full investigation. The security failure was described as catastrophic. Fagan wasn't even charged with trespassing. It was a civil offence, not criminal. He was charged with stealing a bottle of wine. Here's the part that still doesn't make sense. This was his 2nd time inside the palace. A month earlier, June 7th, Fagan had broken in, found a bottle of wine in an unlocked room, and quietly let himself out. Nobody noticed. No investigation, nothing. A man had walked into Buckingham Palace twice, and the 2nd time he made it all the way to the Queen's bedroom before anyone moved. 300 years. A swamp. A failed silk farm. A duke's vanity project. A queen's family home. A construction disaster. The heart of an empire. Bombed 9 times. Breached twice by a single man. And still standing. What's remarkable about Buckingham Palace isn't the chandeliers or the staterooms or the 78 bathrooms. It's that every time history tried to break it, through war, through scandal, through failure, it didn't. The building survived. The institution survived. And if you walk past those gates today and just see tourists and guards, now you know what's really behind them. If this video gave you something you didn't know before, subscribe, because next time we go somewhere even darker.